Hey, it's Arvid, and this is the Bootstrapped Founder. We are living through a fascinating moment in software development right now. I am certainly. I enjoy using AI coding tools that build features much faster than ever before. These things can scan my entire code base. The context windows are just big enough now. They spot things that I miss, and they implement changes that I want them to implement across dozens of files in seconds. It's pretty much incredible. But there's something we need to talk about here. In all this positive perspective, there's something that's quietly accumulating in our projects right now while we marvel at how quickly we can ship these features. And that is called comprehension debt. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. A quick word here from our sponsor, Paddle.com. I use Paddle as my merchant of record for all my software projects. They take care of stuff like taxes, currencies, and tracking the client transactions. They even update credit cards in the background, like for our customers if they expire and then have to be re-updated, so that I can focus on dealing with my competitors, not banks or financial regulators. I can just focus on serving my customers. If you think you would rather just build your product, well, do check out Paddle.com as your merchant of record payment provider. Now, comprehension debt. I think it's something just like technical debt, but it is also fundamentally different. Conceptually, it falls into the same category. Technical debt is about choices that developers consciously make in a certain moment to then defer work until a later stage of the business, right? You know you're taking a shortcut, you build something that you know you will have to come back and fix at some point, but you do it anyway because you know I'll get to it when and if there is time in the future, right? A business that is trying to build a perfect piece of software is never going to finish because everything in the world changes all the time. So you are good with what you have, and then you say, I'll come back later and fix it. That's traditional technical debt. But comprehension debt, and that is something that I didn't realize until a couple of weeks ago existed, is different. It's when we don't comprehend, we don't understand what the system does anymore. We don't understand it because we never built the understanding in the first place. That is happening more and more with AI-generated code. Let me get back to where this comes from. There's this concept that I came across from Peter Nauer, the mathematician behind the Backus-Nauer form, which if you ever studied computer science academically, you will have been annoyed by at some point. But not only did he invent interesting math, he also wrote a paper about theory building. The idea here is that code implodes when the team that has the theory, the mental model for that particular piece of code is dissolved. That is not what the paper is about. It's about what this theory is. But one of the points is that the code will keep running and keep producing results, sure, if the team leaves. But the moment you try to modify that code, you're in trouble because you don't have the theory to actually work with it. And Nauer says that you have to rebuild not just the program, but also its underlying theory. That has to be rebuilt by this new team so that a new program with a new similar theory can get built that is then maintainable. So the theory of a program is not just the code you write, it's the abstraction in your mind that you have for what the code should be before you code it. And this has always been a challenge in software projects, right? The teams have dissolved and the person responsible for one implementation left, and now nobody understands how it works. Well, that has very little to do with the code. It has a lot to do with the theory behind the code. And AI makes it exponentially more complex at this point. Because here's what happens when you use AI coding tools. You give it a prompt for a feature. The AI then actually assembles a very quick and very ephemeral internal mental model, if we can call it this, of what needs to be done and what needs to be changed. And you see this in all these wonderful coding tools, right? They pull things together from different parts of the code base, and then they say something like thinking, but they figure it out. They then know what to change. They even see connections that you as a developer might have missed because they can scan through the whole code base and keep it all in mind, in quotes, and see all the little moving parts. So the AI assembles something akin to a theory. It's probably inadequate in some ways, but it's sufficiently adequate for a particular task if the prompt is well written, right? It builds a theory of the code base of the product and then implements the feature. And if you're lucky, If it's in your system prompt, you tell it to write tests or document the behavior in some way, and then you have some system for the agentic tool to recover its theory in later steps. But the problem is, the biggest problem here is that the actual model that it created, this mental model, the theory of the product, is never fully persisted. It's never written to disk or written to RAM. It is immediately lost once this chain of prompting is over. Once the prompt is run through and the context of that conversation is done, this mental model is gone. And nobody now knows the theory of the product. So constantly, by adding more and more features to your product, you are facilitating the creation of new, slightly different mental models every single time you prompt, because there is no persistent path. Models are built up, implemented through, and torn down. And if you don't read the code, if you don't understand what is added and why, if you don't integrate it into your own theory, you will never develop this model of your code base, of your product as a developer. Even if you're the one instructing, you will never comprehend the underlying theory of the product. And this creates a real problem, because eventually, if the AI, for some reason, is unable to rebuild the underlying understanding or that model, the code base, as it had in the past, then even it will not be able to adequately and correctly modify and change the system. You won't, because you would have to read every single line of code and figure out how things integrate with each other. But even if the AI can't do it, then nobody can. And I think one solution that people are working on right now that is being developed at this moment is context persistence within our agentic coding systems. I bet that OpenAI and Anthropic are trying to work this out. How can we take something that needs to exist, not just in terms of like kind of describing it in a compacted way, but actually persisting that very thing for later use? I don't really know if they're working on it, but I bet they are, because they know that this is one of the drawbacks of using their system, right? This building up the model and collapsing the model over and over again. It's not just about the prompt that you're currently giving, but a deep understanding of the code base maintained over time. We actually might have that model in our code base at some point, like a document in which you work, or that structures the knowledge of the thing, not just text, but in some kind of internal mind representation. But if you are a developer who is already capable of building mental models from reading code, then you really have to do code review right now. If you just want to build something quickly and you don't care about it, then use AI agentic systems to create code for whatever reason and for whatever project. That is fine. But you will find that eventually the ownership of the theory of the code base is gone if you don't build it, right? It needs to lie with you. You need to own the mental model of this code base. So whenever I have an agent build something for me, I read every line that is changed, every line that is added, and particularly lines that are removed, because that also changes the theory of your product. It's very important to do code review on these things, which is hard on platforms that are essentially vibe coding tools, because they kind of hide away the code from you. You don't get to see it. They just do something and the product changes, but you don't see how it's structured. For business reasons here, this is an actual problem. This is a really, really critical thing if you want your business to be acquired at some point, or even if you want to hire. Don't even have to sell your business to run into issues here. You have to be able to transfer not just the raw code base over to somebody, be that through an acquisition or be that if you hire a developer, right? You have to be able to transfer the internal knowledge of that code base, the underlying theory, to that person or their business. And usually this happens through training somebody to replace you in a business, or as you grow, you hire your CTO, you hire your first developer, your lead devs, junior devs, you train them on the code base. You show them, hey, this is how it works. And everybody who gets to work on this code base is eventually trained into it by other people who kind of pass on the theory. You transfer parts of, or the whole mental model, to these people over time. And you transfer it so that they can eventually integrate the model into their own brain and keep the theory alive. But what happens when you don't even have that theory yourself? Well, before it was impossible to build a functional software business without deeply understanding the software of your product. But now there's this chance that somebody could buy a product that nobody understands. If you don't own the theory, even the AI won't really get it. And this adds a very real layer of risk. You have time bombs unintentionally built into the product that once somebody buys the business, so let's think acquisition here, will very quickly surface. because people want to make changes to underlying systems, structures that the previous owner, you that built the thing, that prompted it into existence, you never thought about. When you integrate a new software as a service business into a portfolio for a private equity company, or you integrate it into a system of a strategic buyer, there are things that you will have to touch that the founder of the original creator will have never considered. That's inevitable. You buy a business because it has components that your current system lacks, and your current system has features that this new system lacks, so you have to combine them. And that's usually when these things explode. So the chance of quickly finding a hidden time bomb is actually quite high. And this is likely going to be priced into the acquisition. The money, they pay for it, right? If you cannot show them that either the code is well documented, that these time bombs are avoided or avoidable or manageable or non-existent, or that you are still in complete control of the code base and have a theory of the code base that you're willing to pass on, then you will see that reflected in the valuation of businesses in the next years to come. I think buyers will be very, very aware of this particular problem in the future, to the point that they will be demanding not just a code base, but kind of a documentation system, a traceable and trackable history of the projects and the choices that were made within it. They might even want to see the prompts. They will need some way to train their developers or their agentic systems that they already have internally established in their portfolio companies. They will need to be trained on the correct functionality of your code base and how to best work with it. So at some point, you as a founder will not be available to them anymore. If you sell and you just hand over the business and you leave, well, then you're gone. And even if you have an earnout or something, well, you're still going to be around only for a while. And maybe it was all AI generated. You don't even know how it works yourself. So what do we do about this here? Well, right now, to deal with this kind of comprehension debt, I highly recommend making part of your system prompt for all these agentic tools that you might be using to be very deliberate in commenting. Put comments into the system that facilitate a theory and a mental model of your code base, and have those comments be created every single time code is added. Make it maintainable through comments that systems or people can read and understand the theory better. Add code that helps things be more maintainable, and make this part of your system prompt, right? Tell the prompt to always add good comments that then express the theory of the underlying choices. I think I have this in my system prompts as well. Always log decisions that you make. Why do you choose this over this? Just put it in a log file, add that to that file, and then check it in. You have to document choices that were made along the way. Even put prompts that you added to the agentic system to build features, add those prompts to a document. Keep them logged so you can step through the whole thing historically and see what changes were made and what choices were made for and through these kind of changes. This is also an interesting field to actually build a tool in. It would be a very interesting choice to offer a service or a tool that constantly checks the internal theory of a product as much as it can read from the code base and deduce from reading through it using AI tooling. That's kind of the idea, right? You have this background process that just grabs every change that is made and then tries to figure it out, is this actually making the product more consistent in terms of the internal theory or less, right? It would constantly keep the theory both available to AI systems, maybe as an MCP or a description, code examples, code locations, and over time, track when the theory changes. So for example, let's say you've determined as a programs designer that in every list you create, people can sort the list, they can filter the list, and export the list as a CSV file. It's kind of the basic stuff, right? That's just a choice you made. And that's the theory of your product. It does this. Every list, you have a shared component, you have shared views and shared design patterns, and if there's a list, sortable, filterable, exportable. So over time, you're prompting, and all of a sudden the AI chooses to build a new list that is sortable and filterable, but does not have an export. So at that point, the theory of your system changes from every list has this feature to some lists have this feature. And at that point, you should be either alerted or your agentic system is told that there's a discrepancy and it should recreate the actual theory that existed prior to this. I think that would be an interesting tool that I personally would use as part of my agentic toolchain, kind of an internal error tool, like a code quality maintenance tool, but not about the actual code efficiency, but about the underlying theory. We don't really have many tools right now that deal with code quality before errors happen, at least not in the web space. I think this very much exists in the Java and C world where the static analysis is a little bit easier. But for all these dynamically typed languages where everything is kind of crazy, it's harder, right? It's harder to really determine quality here. But I think this consistency internal theory tool would be a good one for people to use. So maybe comprehension that can be fought by a deeper and more obvious understanding of the underlying theory in software businesses. Maybe that's what we should aim for as founders. We have to think about the fact that this will be an additional risk if we add comprehension debt to our product, even though we get features out much faster. And it's something that an acquirer or us in the future will have to pay for at some point. So really be careful with how much of the theory building you allow your AI to do and control without telling you, or at least be intentional about how much of this theory you actively retain. Because at the end of the day, your business isn't just the code, it's the understanding of what makes that code go, what the code does, why it does it, and how it all fits together. And that understanding is becoming more valuable than ever. Thank you for listening to the Bootstrapped Founder. You can find me on Twitter at avidkahl, ARVIDKAHL. Attention founders and PR experts and marketing teams, are you missing critical conversations about your brand? Well, Podscan.fm monitors over 4 million podcasts in real time. They're alerting you when influencers, customers, or competitors mention you, and you can turn unstructured podcast chatter into competitive intelligence, PR opportunities, and customer insights with our powerful API. And if you're searching for your next venture, you can discover validated problems straight from the market at ideas.podscan.fm, where AI identifies startup opportunities from hundreds of hours of expert discussions daily, so you can build what people are already asking for and talking about. Thanks for listening. Have a